An Arlington, Virginia woman named Jacqueline Gibbs was taking her daily jog. In September 2023, when she felt an unwelcome slap to her rear end, a man whizzed by on his electric bicycle with a smug grin on his face, giving her a good idea of who the culprit was. Determined to see the man held accountable for his actions, the jogger tried chasing after her accoster. As he continued to smirk and laugh at her, Gibbs couldn't catch up to the man, so she flagged down a driver, jumped in his car and asked him to help her pursue the suspect. The Good Samaritan obliged, and they followed the man for nearly a mile before they caught up to him at a crosswalk, where Gibbs put him in a chokehold until police arrived. Gibbs later told Fox 5 that the accused groper, 25-year-old Edgar Estrada España, immediately began apologizing when she took him down. As they waited for responding officers, Gibbs grilled España with guilt-inducing questions like if he had a mum, daughter, or sister, forcing him to think about how he'd feel if someone he cared about had been slapped or grabbed by a stranger. España was treated for minor injuries he sustained while being taken down by his accuser, then booked into custody on suspicion of assault and battery. He was issued a summons to return to court at a later date. Number 13. Javier Thomas Jones. While working out in the gym of her Tampa, Florida apartment complex in January of 2023, 24-year-old Nashali Alma saw a man approaching the facility's locked door. She had seen him at the gym before, so she buzzed him inside, thinking he was just an ordinary resident coming to work out and that he had forgotten his key. Everything seemed normal for the first minutes as Alma continued her workout, but things took a disturbing turn when the man, later identified as 25-year-old Javier Thomas Jones, allegedly approached a young woman and tried to grab her waist. Alma immediately fought back, and the ensuing struggle lasted for more than a minute as they fell to the ground and wrestled. Alma briefly gained the upper hand by grabbing the man's beard and twisting it really hard. She later told ABC 11 that she could tell based on the suspect's facial expression that it was extremely painful. Despite this, Thomas Jones managed to pin Alma to the ground as she continued defending herself and tried to dial 911. Every time Alma tried to call the police, her attacker grabbed her arm. So she put the phone down and fought as hard as she could, hoping that Thomas Jones would eventually get tired and give up. Luckily, it worked. By the end of the video, the attacker was visibly exhausted, enabling Alma to break free and flee the gym. Thomas Jones also fled, and he allegedly tried to victimize another woman before Hillsborough County Sheriff's deputies located him the next day. He was charged with battery, false imprisonment, and kidnapping, and the current status of the case is unclear. Number 12. Stephen Jenkins. In March of 2021, an 83-year-old Asian American man and a 75-year-old woman who was also of Asian descent were attacked by a much younger man in San Francisco. Later identified as a 39-year-old chronically homeless man named Stephen Jenkins, the suspect was being chased by a security guard after assaulting the elderly man when he allegedly punched Zhao Zhenji in the eye. Bystanders overheard the senior citizen saying, "You bum, why did you hit me?" Xi reportedly returned Jenkins' punch with one of her own. Footage captured after the incident showed the woman with a wooden paddle in her hand while Jenkins could be seen handcuffed to an ambulance stretcher with a bleeding mouth wound. Police said that Xi wasn't responsible for Jenkins' injuries and that he was taken to the hospital for an unrelated prior medical condition. Video released in the attack's aftermath showed that Jenkins had been assaulted by several people right before he punched Xi, who swatted his feet with her wooden paddle. While this doesn't take away from Xi's clear willingness to stand up for herself, the new information challenged initial reports that the elderly woman had caused Jenkins' busted lip. Jenkins was charged with 2 counts of elder abuse and 2 counts of assault likely to produce great bodily injury. His public defender, Taiwanese-born Eric McBurney, claimed that his client's history of severe mental illness was to blame for the attack. McBurney denied that Jenkins acted out of racial prejudice, even though the public's mind was made up that the defendant had committed a hate crime. According to the most recent available updates on the case from 2022, Jenkins remained in custody, and the charges against him were still pending. Number 11. Las Vegas homeowner sends intruders running. In January 2016, North Las Vegas resident Joey Imerti noticed a group of 2 or 3 men staked out near his home. They were suspiciously eyeballing his house all day, prompting Imerti to keep his rifle nearby just in case the strangers had plans to target him. Later that day, the suspects approached the home and rang the doorbell for around 10 minutes. When nobody answered, they pried open a locked back window. One of the men crawled through the window and entered the living room with a hammer in his hand. He was surprised to see Imerti waiting with his rifle drawn. Imerti ordered the suspect to freeze, but the suspect continued moving, so Imerti fired 2 shots. Both missed, but it was enough to send the intruder fleeing. Speaking with local station KTNV, Imerti said he wasn't shooting to kill, but that he definitely would have hit the suspect if his gun hadn't jammed. Police recovered fingerprints from the scene but were unable to track down the suspects. It's unclear whether the accused burglars were ever identified or arrested. Number 10. Senior citizen takes down ATM robber. A 77-year-old Welshman earned widespread praise in early 2020 after defending himself against a masked thief who tried to rob him at an outdoor ATM in Cardiff. Identified in news reports by the first name Trevor, the senior citizen had just withdrawn cash when a stranger approached him and demanded his money and bank card. The suspect grabbed Trevor by the collar, and the elderly gentleman responded by putting the man in a shoulder lock and punching him repeatedly. A brief struggle ensued before the thief gave up and fled the scene. Despite the victim's seemingly fearless reaction to the attempted robbery, police said he was pretty shaken up. At the same time, he was grateful nothing worse happened. In the aftermath of the incident, 40-year-old Michael Collins was identified as the perpetrator, and he was sentenced to 3 years in prison later that same year. Number 9. Kevin Campbell and Travis Jones. In March of 2019, brothers Alec and Jacob Tanous traveled from Indiana to Florida with their cousins Alex and Eric Wisby for spring break. The 4 relatives were at a gas station in Fort Lauderdale during the early morning hours when a man approached them and pulled a gun. He pressed the weapon into Alec Tanous' stomach and demanded the men's valuables. Instead of handing over their belongings, the spring breakers fought back. Surveillance footage showed Alex Wisby putting the thief in a chokehold while Jacob Tanous tried to grab his gun. A suspected accomplice of the robber exited a nearby car and tried pulling the men away from the gunman. As the fight spilled onto the ground, Eric Wisby got a hold of the gun and pointed it at the 2 strangers while commanding them to leave and get a job. The suspects wasted no time heeding Eric's warning and fleeing the scene. After initially being threatened with a deadly weapon and turning the tables, the victims walked away with only minor cuts and bruises. Law enforcement arrested the gunman's alleged accomplice, 33-year-old Kevin Campbell, who was found hiding in some bushes by a police K9. 2 days after the foiled robbery attempt, police apprehended the accused gunman, 31-year-old Travis Jones. State records show that Jones served part of a 3-year prison sentence for attempted robbery with a deadly weapon before being released in late 2021. He's on supervised release until 2028. Campbell was convicted of the same charge in late 2023 and was released in early 2024 after serving part of a 1.5-year prison sentence. Number 8. Exmarine thwarts home robbery. In June of 2023, 3 suspects followed a 75-year-old Korean military veteran and his wife as they drove to their Fullerton, California home after church and a shopping trip to the Home Depot. Surveillance footage showed 2 of the suspects approaching the man and pepper spraying him in broad daylight before they pushed him into his garage. He fought back and ran the men out of his driveway with help from a nearby landscaping crew who overheard the homeowner's screams and came to his aid. Speaking with ABC7 after the botched robbery attempt, The victim's son claimed that the suspects initially told his father that someone had hit his car. One of the men pointed at the bumper of the victim's Tesla, which appeared to be a distraction tactic in order to catch the victim off guard when they pepper sprayed him. The victim's son speculated that the glasses his dad was wearing helped to protect him from the pepper spray, giving him an opportunity to fight back. He described the landscapers who sprang into actions as heroes for helping his father. At the time, police said they were investigating the incident, which they believed was connected to another recent burglary. Updates on whether the suspects were caught have not been forthcoming. Number 7. Marlon Stewart. 61-year-old liquor store clerk Niall Stranix was mopping the floor at his workplace in Leeds, England, in April 2023, when a man entered the business and robbed a female cashier at gunpoint. Unaware that the thief had just robbed another liquor store and some teenagers, Stranix put an end to the man's crime spree by putting him in a headlock. The clerk refused to release his grip on the suspect, even after being struck in the head with a glass bottle. Later identified as 37-year-old Marlon Stewart, the thief was arrested later that evening on 13 charges relating to his various crimes. According to authorities, Stewart's destructive campaign began after he bought a bottle of vodka and robbed a trio of 19-year-olds, making off with 2 of the victims' phones. He then made his way into a nearby liquor store where he cleaned out the cash register, stole a customer's car keys, and fled the scene in her Audi. From there, Stewart went to the liquor store where Stranix bravely subdued him. Police praised Stranix for his quick thinking decision to fight back, but also advised the public against responding to a thief in a similar manner. Stewart eventually admitted to 4 counts of robbery, 5 counts of possession of a firearm while committing a robbery, and 1 count each of attempted robbery, assault occasioning actual bodily harm, driving while disqualified, and driving without insurance. He was sentenced to 10 years and 4 months in prison. Number 6. Joshua Lee Simmons. In September 2023, a masked and armed thief attempted to rob a family-owned jewelry store in El Monte, California in broad daylight, but he didn't get very far because the employees at Mez's Jewelry fought back. Surveillance footage showed the smash-and-grab suspect entering the store, pepper spraying a worker, and smashing a jewelry case with a hammer. Upon realizing what was going on, several employees sprang into action. In the video, they could be seen kicking, punching, and beating the suspect with a stick as he struck them and continued to pepper spray them. The employees, who consisted of a young man, his father, and his uncle, ripped the man's shirt off before he took off running with his pants falling down. They later told ABC7 that the man threatened them and promised he would be back before he bolted out the door. A few people tried to pursue the suspect, but he managed to slip out of sight. Several days after the crime, police identified the wanted fugitive as 36-year-old Joshua Lee Simmons. Weeks later, in October 2023, Simmons was arrested on suspicion of killing aspiring rapper Javonta Murphy, whose body was found in a barrel that was floating in the Malibu Lagoon. In early 2024, Simmons was hit with another murder charge in connection with the fatal shooting of a 50-year-old man named Anthony Solok. Needless to say, he has much bigger problems on his hands than a failed burglary as he waits to face his ongoing cases in court. Number 5. Bank employee gives robber the boot. 60-year-old Jill Beatty was unlocking the door at First State Bank in Abilene, Texas, in October 2019 when a man jumped out of some nearby bushes and forced her to let him into the building at gunpoint. 15 minutes later, the suspect forced another employee into the building at gunpoint as she arrived for her shift. Seeing an opportunity to thwart the attempted robbery in progress, Beatty shoved the suspect toward the door and kicked him. The robber struck Beatty in the head with his gun, then fled the scene in a Cadillac. Then Police Chief Stan Standridge commended Beatty for keeping a cool head throughout the terrifying situation. In addition to her calculated decision to take physical action against the suspect, she also tried to negotiate with him while he held her captive. Authorities appealed to the public for information that could help to identify the suspect, who they described as having a pronounced limp and wearing an Ed Hardy-style t-shirt. He was suspected in multiple bank robberies dating back to 2015, identified as 70-year-old James Earl Green Jr. The accused bank robber was finally arrested nearly a year after the 2019 robbery. In 2022, Green was convicted of attempted bank robbery in federal court. He was sentenced to 15 years in prison, which means he could easily end up spending the rest of his life behind bars. Number 4. Joseph Rivera. 45-year-old Anissa Tinin and her granddaughter were watching Taylor Swift's concert movie at Tinin's home in Albuquerque in April 2024 when an intruder suddenly appeared in the dining room. Identified by law enforcement as 32-year-old Joseph Rivera, the suspect was allegedly fleeing from the police after crashing a stolen car. He had driven over a set of spike strips and had continued driving on the vehicle's rims until he got into a wreck. Tinin would later claim that the intruder threatened to kill both her and her granddaughter if she didn't do exactly as he said. He grabbed Tinin's car keys and fled, prompting the victim to dial 911. When the suspect returned shortly thereafter and forced his way through the locked front door, Tinin was waiting with her gun. She warned Rivera to get back, informed him that she had a gun, and threatened to shoot him, but he threatened to heed Tinin's warnings, so she shot him in the abdomen. Tinin dialed 911 again and told the dispatcher that the suspect was bleeding on her kitchen floor. As she waited for the police to arrive, she offered to put pressure on the intruder's wound and to bring him water, but warned him that she wouldn't hesitate to pull the trigger again if he tried making any fast moves. Rivera survived and is now facing charges of burglary and auto theft. He has a lengthy criminal history, including 5 prior felony convictions, and had a warrant out for his arrest at the time of the home invasion after failing to appear in court on an unrelated pending case. The accused intruder is now being held in custody as he awaits the outcomes of his multiple ongoing cases. Number 3. Midday Muggin. 23-year-old Concepcion Escalante was working alone at her family's insurance office in Pomona, California in September 2019 when a man entered and expressed an interest in an insurance quote. He said he had to go home and grab his driver's license, left the store and returned 20 minutes later with a steak knife. The man had noticed some cash on Escalante's desk and was now ordering her to hand it over. But she wasn't about to do that. Instead, she hit the suspect's crotch and attempted to disarm him, leading to a struggle between the two. As the man tried forcing her to the floor, Escalante continued kicking the suspect and trying to grab the knife for over a minute before he gave up and fled the store with $1,000 in cash. Law enforcement released a description of the suspect, who was described as thin and in his mid-50s, along with surveillance footage of the botched robbery. He was also suspected in 2 other robberies that occurred earlier that day, including at a local liquor store. Unfortunately, there has been no news of the man being identified or arrested. Speaking with local station KTLA, Escalante said she doesn't recommend fighting back against an armed thief, knowing the situation could have had a much worse ending. She admitted to feeling lucky that she hadn't been stabbed or injured in the encounter. Today's topic was requested by Raven's Darkness and Daniela Nicoara 9168. If you have any other topics you'd like to learn about, subscribe and let us know in the comments section below. Number 2. Henry Mann. In September 2015, 60-year-old Reuben Kendrick came face to face with the barrel of a gun as he exited a bank bathroom in Warren, Michigan. A thief was robbing the bank where Kendrick had come to do business as a customer, identified by police as 43-year-old Henry Mann. The accused bank robber had allegedly pretended to be a customer at first. According to a criminal complaint, he asked the teller how to set up a direct deposit and pulled a gun on her when she asked him to wait. When Kendrick exited the bathroom, he and several employees were ordered behind the counter. Kendrick told the robber he couldn't go behind the counter, but he was forced, as the thief ordered the employees to give him all the money without any die packs. Kendrick took advantage of the distraction and covertly loaded his revolver. He fired 4 shots, including 3 that hit the suspect in both his arms and one of his legs. Instead of shooting back, man tried to flee, but he collapsed from his injuries, dropping the $11,000 in cash he had just stolen onto the ground outside the bank. Man survived his gunshot wounds and eventually pleaded guilty to brandishing a firearm during a crime of violence and bank robbery. He was sentenced to 10 years in federal prison, and Kendrick was cleared of any wrongdoing by authorities, who deemed the shooting to be a justified act of self-defense. We will line up our video about when retaliation goes wrong immediately after number 1. Stick around if you haven't seen that one yet. Number 1. Lawrence Turner, late one afternoon in January of 2017, 34-year-old Lawrence Turner entered an Alpine bank in Rockford, Illinois, and shot a bullet into the ceiling. He then opened fire on the bank security guard, Brian Harrison, who also happened to be a retired sheriff's deputy. Harrison shot back twice in self-defense, striking Turner in the chest and buttocks. Turner died from his injuries, but nobody else at the scene was injured. Local authorities credited Harrison with saving lives by springing into action and using his law enforcement training to protect himself and those around him. According to police, Turner was linked with at least 3 other armed robberies that had taken place in the area in recent months. He had also fired his gun during the previous crimes and was allegedly on drugs during the robbery that claimed his life. The news about Turner's death and his suspected crimes shocked those who knew him. His mother, Lucille Turner, told the Rockford Register-Star that she couldn't recall anything about her son or his lifestyle that would have served as a warning sign that he was going to rob a bank. A neighbor who spoke to Lawrence on the day of the robbery said they had plans to go out to eat together later that day. Nothing seemed amiss, although the neighbor admitted that Lawrence was never very clear about what he did for a living during the dozen or so years that the two knew each other. Lucille Turner admitted that there was evidence of her son committing the robbery that he died during, but she insisted that Lawrence's poor decisions didn't define him as a person. Unfortunately for his loved ones, however, his regrettable choices cost him his life. 22-year-old Norman Christopher Collier IV sought to avenge the death of his brother, but in doing so murdered an innocent man on April the 25th of 2021. At around 5 p.m. on April the 22nd, Norman's brother, 19-year-old Cameron Collier, was shot to death in the driver's seat of his 2013 Honda Accord. The police indicated that the motive for the killing, which unfolded on Westlake Drive in DeSoto, Texas, was robbery. Rumors began to bubble up on social media, mistakenly pinpointing Lancaster resident Colby Graham as the killer. 3 days later, during a balloon release ceremony in Laziga Park in Cameron's honor, Norman shot 20-year-old Graham in the head in retaliation for his brother's death. He was subsequently arrested and held on a $1 million bond. Several days later, Graham ended up succumbing to his gunshot wound. Law enforcement were 100% positive that Graham wasn't responsible for the Collier's loss. The spokesman for the local police department said that it was the first time in his career that rumors on social media caused the death of an innocent person. On May the 12th, authorities in Pleasant Grove apprehended Cameron's actual killer, a teenager with an extensive criminal record. The suspect was consequently charged with capital murder. According to court records, Norman was indicted by a grand jury on the same charge the following month. Number 6. Raul Alexander Cuevas. On March the 29th of 2023, 31-year-old Idaho man Raul Alexander Cuevas murdered an individual in Nampa who was the prime suspect in an ongoing homicide investigation. A day prior, at around 8:45 p.m., a 52-year-old woman by the name of Michelle E. Luna had reportedly passed away after being stabbed multiple times at her West Grouse Street residence. 39-year-old Jesus R. Urrutia was immediately identified as the suspect and charged with first-degree murder. Shortly after 7 o'clock the following morning, law enforcement responded to a call about a man who'd been stabbed at a gas station. The victim was found slumped inside a vehicle while the engine was still running. He suffered a sharp force injury to the chest and was later identified as Urrutia. The latter was transported to a hospital by EMTs but was pronounced dead within the hour. Subsequently, 20 miles away from the station, Quas was arrested by Aier County Sheriff's deputies in connection with the suspected killer's death. He went on to reveal that Luna was his mother, and he thus targeted her killer in retaliation. The coroner's office officially ruled Urrutia's death a homicide. The suspect was taken into police custody on a charge of first-degree murder. At the time, authorities hadn't officially determined the motive behind the attack at the gas station, as the county sheriff's office said they were pursuing different leads. However, following Quas' apprehension, his unfortunate ties to Urrutia eventually came to light. Number 5. Terren Cole Jr. On November the 6th of 2019, the charred remains of 28-year-old Terren Cole Jr. was found inside an abandoned car in Alcorn, Mississippi. Subsequent reports identified the man as a victim of a revenge killing for the death of 26-year-old Corinth man Jeffrey Moore. Authorities suspected Cole as the individual responsible for the disappearance and presumed murder of Moore, who was last seen by his family on October the 28th of 2019. Investigators revealed that 39-year-old David Rhodes, along with 2 accomplices, tracked Cole down, shot him, drove 6 miles away to Main Street and Buchanan in Corinth, and burned his body inside the vehicle. Days later, Rhodes was arrested and charged with murder, arson, tampering with evidence, and possession of a firearm by a felon. His partners in crime, 26-year-old Christina Gurley and Elisa Wilburn, aged 18, were arrested on November the 14th and charged with accessory after the fact and tampering with evidence. Moore's body was never found. Number 4. Charlotte Claris. Florida woman Charlotte Claris from Altoona sent indecent photos of herself to her ex's son on the afternoon of June the 6th of 2016. The incident occurred in the aftermath of the couple's contentious split, which was allegedly followed by repeated harassment of each other. 46-year-old Claris told the police she'd used Facebook to send 2 graphic pictures to the teenager. One of the explicit images reportedly included the teen's father as well. The woman claimed to have sent the photographs after her ex had threatened to leak a private video of her to her family. On September the 27th, Claris was arrested and booked at the Polk County Jail. Her attorney, Carmen Anderson, released a statement detailing how she'd been the victim of domestic abuse during her relationship with the ex in question. Anderson also posted an audio clip of Claris being threatened by the former flame, who vowed to get even after she'd called the cops on him. The woman was charged with dissemination and exhibition of obscene material to minors. She was released on a $1,000 bond. The county attorney's office ultimately declined to prosecute because there was a need for further investigation. Number 3. Trayon Banks. On September the 14th of 2020, Shelvick Henry was shot in the back 3 times in Vero Beach, Florida, in retaliation for the 2018 murders of Christopher Thomas Jr. and Anthony Williams. Thomas and Williams, who went by the rap names YNW Juvie and YNW Sack Chaser, respectively, had allegedly been murdered by 2 members of their own hip-hop collective, Cortland YNW Portland Henry and Jamel YNW Melly Demons. The victim in the 2020 shooting, 43-year-old Shelvick Henry, was Cortland's father. He was shot at the Victory Park apartment on Lincoln Drive in Gifford and then transported to the Regional Medical Center in Fort Pierce. On September the 21st of 2020, a week after he had been shot, Shelvick was taken off a ventilator and told detectives that he had been shot by 2 black males. When officers showed him a photo lineup, he identified 18-year-old Trayon Banks and Shaquem Parker. His statement matched several anonymous tips channeled through law enforcement. Banks and Parker were suspected to have targeted Shelvick Henry as retaliation for his son's involvement in the 2018 murders of the 2 rappers. 2 days after the identification, Banks was arrested by Indian River County deputies in the 1800 block of Old Dixie Highway and charged with first-degree attempted murder with a firearm. He was held at the county jail on a $250,000 bond. It is unclear what happened to the second suspect in the case, Shaquem Parker. Number 2. Jacqueline Gibbs and Jesse Klee. In July of 2022, 26-year-old Jacqueline Gibbs almost died after she ingested what she believes to have been bad drugs she'd purchased from a dealer. Several weeks later, her boyfriend, 30-year-old Jesse Clee, purchased a 9mm handgun and conspired with Gibbs to jump the dealer in question. She called the latter on July the 25th and requested that they meet again at around midnight. The couple, together with two other unidentified individuals, hopped in a blue Ford Crown Victoria and went to the agreed-upon rendezvous point at Lake Worth Beach. In a residential neighborhood west of Federal Highway, Clee leaned over from the passenger seat and shot the drug dealer 4 times in the chest with the handgun. They then fled north near Interstate 95. To hide out from law enforcement, the group checked in at a Holiday Inn Express. The next day, Gibbs was arrested by deputies from the Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office for possession of fentanyl and drug paraphernalia. After she was released on bond in connection with the drug charges, Gibbs was then arrested again on July the 28th of 2022. She was charged as a principal to the dealer's murder for helping Clee, who was also arrested and charged with first-degree murder. The circuit court judge ordered that the couple be held in custody without bail. Number 1. Brian Bush. Southwest Houston man Brian Bush was arrested and charged with murder after he fatally shot his girlfriend's alleged killer on February the 28th of 2023. The man Bush targeted, identified as Earl Marcel Green, had reportedly been the woman's childhood friend. As stated in court records, 38-year-old Bush and his girlfriend, 45-year-old Clothea Garrett, ran into Green as they pulled up to a Sonic drive-thru on South Post Oak Road on February the 26th. The three engaged in what was described as a friendly conversation. However, when Bush left the vehicle to order food, Green abruptly opened fire on Garrett. As reported by ABC 13, an eyewitness said it was bad at the scene, where the woman was fatally shot at least 7 times. The following day, Green was charged with her murder. Around midday on February the 28th, the suspect was gunned down at the intersection of Rockergate Drive and Blue Ridge Road in southwest Houston. Bush was arrested for the revenge killing and held at the Harris County Jail, although he was reportedly charged in Fort Bend County, where the incident had actually taken place. Thanks for watching. Would you rather get locked in a UFC cage with a raging pit bull or with an aggressive anaconda? Let us know in the comments section below.